Well, hey everyone, how are you doing? It is Kristi, it is Sunday, and it is Weekend Winters. I hope you are doing well, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. Two sort of technical things, or two like show announcements before we start. The first is that my lighting broke over the week. It was working perfectly, and then the light stopped working. So I'm going to be a bit oddly lit in this show. I'm just using natural light and the light that I have for my camera. So sorry. Like, this is the best I can do. The other thing is that I'm tired, y'all. I'm tired. So this will probably only go about a half an hour. As a consequence of me being tired, I could not handle getting up this morning, binging Weber, trying to understand Weber, and then understand Weber well enough in the section I'd read to distill it down into, Cliff Notes. I'm not mentally there. So as a consequence, we're gonna keep it pretty light today. We're going to oh yeah, that's right. I'm switching this around because sorry, I'm still a little bit changing myself. And yes, we're gonna be a bit more passive. I'm gonna look, well, first I want to let you guys know, in case you didn't, that I've got a video that I put out yesterday. I won't show you the video because I want you to go watch it, but I will discuss it. And what would be helpful for me, if you guys don't mind, is I'll tell you sort of what the thesis of the video is, the theory that I'm trying to get to when it comes to what I would do with this video. And then finally, if you have any suggestions or pointers, that might help. So, hey, Po Mama Sid, how are you doing? Trans Gamer Girl in the Hizza, hello. Hi. Lonely Wolf, good to see you, mate. And Priority 76, also good to see you. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by and spending some time with me here in the morning with you. I do appreciate it. Even if I'm weirdly lit because I'm using substandard lighting, but you'll forgive me, I am sure. All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and get right into this because I'm still prepping. So the reason I'm tired is I did a whole session of D&D last night, and it's been and I'm also I've been doing a lot of D&D stuff. I've been nerding out. It's totally my own fault, but yes, I did use a lot of brain capacity on that and prep for tonight. So as a consequence, good reasons to be tired. I'm tired nonetheless. All right, let's go on with I just want to show you a bit of, well, I'll just show you where it is. So on my channel, I'm really frustrated about the fact that, Gilly, Bogosian, Lindsay, these lot have been able to just put out live hair of older, Edna Mode. I know that's that's a lot of people say because of the 20s bob. Yes. And I also normally I do a wash right before, and this is leftover from yesterday. It'll be fun. But thank you. All right, so the idea of I'm responding to social justice. The idea is that they just put out these cheat sheets with no references, no resources, and they're lies. I don't want to spend though a whole bunch of time getting into things because sometimes the topics are, you just end up putting 150 or 200% more time and effort into a topic in order to understand it well enough to back up and distill it down to the points you want. Kind of like what I do with the social philosophy when we do it, when I'm not too lazy. This I wanted to be a little bit briefer. The idea was ideally something that someone could put up on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, those kinds of things. So it is capped to just 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And who put out the cheat sheets? So this cheat sheet was written by the lacking brain trust of Bruce Gilly, who wrote that piece in defense of colonialism or imperialism, Peter Bogosian, who is a hack, and James Lindsay, who is also a hack and a liar, racist and a misogynist. And also this not scholarly organization of Oregon Association of Scholars. It's all right-wing, white supremacist, white-centered rhetoric. Kevin and I went over it on the happy hour. I actually took a look at it. So I actually have do I have? Yes, I do. The right one? I can't show you. Oh, this is the old version, but this was the old version of what they did. And I think I've got the new version in a file somewhere else. But it's rehashed white supremacist talking. End of the day. So I'm using Doodly. as a software program because it does allow me to, I'll show you a little bit of it. I'll mute it though, because, So this is the Doodly software, and it just, allows you to kind of do more animated related stuff. It reduces the need for me to be on camera, and it's a little bit more long-term. It kind of keeps in terms of how fresh it looks. In 5 years, this won't look as old as if I did a video. So check it out. 3 people who share single brains. Yes, absolutely. So the idea is I get actual reputable sources. I use the Oxford reference online, as well as some encyclopedia for health and well-being that is published by some academic publisher. And I compare the content of those definitions to what the Brain Fart Trust, I call them that, the Brain Fart Trust says. And then just kind of point out what? So go have a check and look at that. Maybe we can come back to that next week and give me some feedback on it. And if the idea is, so if you go back here to my graphic, this was the image. Blow it up on this screen. See it. I want to go through one by one each one of these concepts and provide better definitions. And then at the end of the day, the idea would be to do all of them in one long video, one after. So that's the current idea. People think that's cool. Who else is Lindsay's in chat. Hello and good morning. I hope you are doing well. All right. I'm really already running out of steam. So this is going to be maybe a super short show, but I wanted to give this some exposure. Someone else on Twitter posted about this series, and I hadn't known about it, hadn't heard about it, and thought it would be a good time to come along with you all and just have a bit of a look. So obviously with fair use and whatnot, there's some issues of copyright. So instead of playing the video, I thought what we could do is just dip into the description boxes and look to see what the course is going to be covering. So there's a topic here that gets your interest. I'll hit pause. And I don't really need my headphones if we're going to be doing it. So, am I looking the right way? Yes, I am. All right. I just get paranoid about which direction I'm facing for the camera, and it's hard to see when I'm facing in this way. Now, this one is the intro. First video in the series came out back in April, and I think too, with CRT being such a hot topic, that having this kind of information, mostly honestly for teachers who are sincere and good-hearted and want to teach students facts about American history, not white-centered, whitewashing, myth-making as history. So in the first one, oh my gosh! So I think I can blow this up a little bit. This is going to be amazing. I don't honestly, if this is true, they're going to make, okay, just the term I saw here. Over the course of 50 episodes. 50 episodes? 50, I hadn't seen that before. I didn't read this far. I just sort of started the video, didn't really watch it. But if they actually have 50 episodes planned, that is phenomenal. That is really, really exciting, because there are some people who have the opinion that why do we even need African American history? And when you start to fill in the blanks of how much content there is that is being omitted in favor of the great white men of history narrative, that is preferred white supremacist narrative. Over the course of 50 episodes, we're going to learn about Black American history. Clint Smith will teach you about the experience of Black people in America from the arrival of the first enslaved Black people who arrived at Jamestown all the way to the Black Lives Movement. Apparently he's got a book, so let's check that out. How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. Guy's got a book out, knows what he's talking about. Let's go back. So that is the first one. I did start to, as you can, well, you guess you can't see, but I did start to watch that one and have a look at the framework of it And he does talk a little bit about like the linguistics, the language they're going to use, things like that. Because, you know, when we talk about African Americans versus Black Americans, and Black people. So that's the first video, is like an intro of that. Second one, today we're learning about the transatlantic slave trade. This is the first proper episode, which brought millions of captive Africans to the Americas between the 16th and 19th centuries, with the largest number of people trafficked between 1700 and 1808. Whoa, you mean right as the rise of independence for British colonists who were, you know, cis men, or identified as men at the time. Okay. You know, that freedom train. Woohoo! We look at the ships and the crews that brought enslaved people across the ocean via what was known as the Middle Passage, and explore the horrific conditions that these captives. This was actually the kind of stuff you got taught in American history, at least when I was growing up, which obviously was a long time ago, so I hope it would have improved then. But there does seem to be some kind of willingness to acknowledge the barbarity of what was happening kind of like before the revolution, before America became its own state, you know. And I think that there's like enough of a history distance, and Europeans, not just Americans, especially white Southern Americans, directly involved, where it's a little bit seems less threatening to people's sense of being a good person as a white person. Clarify, white people thinking, you know, wanting to feel that they're good people. Talking about the transatlantic slave trade, I think there is a little bit more honesty, because there's some CRT is in any truth about the United States racist past. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me see if I can increase. Yeah, there we go. Let's up your size text here. Easier for me to see. Cat is helping to protect your ears. Oh, okay, nice. We shouldn't be teaching about, yes, science. All right. So that would be like the first one. And as I said, I think that I don't know that we really do enough to teach the brutality of that. It seems to be like, you know, a section of history, like this centuries-long process just gets a, you know, section in a history book, and cover decades of human trafficking, torture, kidnapping, and enslavement. Then, in a sort of succinct thing, it doesn't really get explored. Next up is episode 3, which is about slavery in America. Oop. Oh, I can do that. That's easy. I think what I'm going to have to do to keep bopping all the time, because really what I want to do is look at the description. I'm going to minimize slightly. Right, in the 17th century. Oh no, that was episode 2. Right? No? Okay, yes. In the 17th century, the British colonies in the Americas were getting established in places like Virginia, the system of chattel slavery was also developing. Today we'll learn about the role that slavery played in the early American economy, and how slavery became a legally accepted practice in the first place, and how it contributed to the colony's early economic success. We'll look at the experiences of Anthony Johnson and John Punch to see how legal precedents greatly influenced the developments of slavery were set. All right, we're getting into some honesty here. I'm really looking forward to watching this series, because I have a feeling that it's going to deal with a lot of uncomfortable subjects, with the hypocrisy of white Brits, feeling like, wanting their citizenship, their rights, their ability to earn money to make themselves comfortable, and claiming to be Christians and claiming to be highly moral people, but then also stealing lives, labor, and legacies from Black person after Black person, Black American after Black American. So yeah, this one looks also really good and interesting. All right. Elizabeth Key. This is episode number 3. The legal system can seem like a complicated tangle of arcane rules and loopholes, and it can sometimes seem like it's designed to confuse, but it is possible with the right application for the legal system to rectify injustices. Today we're going to tell you about one of those instances, is the story of Elizabeth Key, who in 1665 won her freedom in a court in Virginia. And I'm almost tempted to say, oh no, please don't tell that story, because then you're going to get the white supremacists going, yeah, see, there wasn't racism. Some black people could use the legal system to get out of slavery. It's that same sort of like, oh, it was a long time ago. Ah. Did the Midwest ever teach about Phyllis Wheatley? Never heard of Phyllis Wheatley. New England is racist AF, but I always took pride in that we learned about Phyllis Wheatley and the rest of America didn't. Yeah, Chris, never heard of her. Never heard of it. Never heard of her. All right, so that's a little dip into maybe, the complications of slavery laws. But of course, white people would take care of that problem, white men in particular. Slave codes were a method of protecting the investment of white enslavers in the colonies. And I'm just like, this is actually a really good way of thinking about it. The dehumanization of human beings by other human beings through the lens of market forces. And honestly, I think a lot of times people go, capitalism, when the same thing happened under feudalism. The same thing happened under Egyptians. You've always had systems where people gang up, get bullies or whatever else, who form power, alliances with power backed up by violence, and then they force other people to do their work for them. However, I do think in terms of exemplifying the dehumanization of slavery and that whole is a good reminder that we have human lives, and yet we have economic systems that are in direct competition with those values. And people generally value their economic purity more than their moral positions on things. They're always willing to compromise their morals. Few people are willing to compromise their economic status, their economic comfort, right? She was America's first poet. Oh, okay, cool. I do think that there are a couple women that come up later in this series, and she may be one of them. I did notice some names on there that I thought, oh, I wonder who this is. We'll see. Oh, I didn't think I even finished that. I got so on the tangent about economics. So, slave codes were a method of protecting the investment of white enslavers in the colonies by restricting the lives of enslaved people in almost every imaginable way. We don't teach about this in the codes restricted enslaved people's ability to move around or engage in commerce that could make them financially independent. They restricted the very opportunities that would allow them to live with even relative freedom. Today we'll learn about how colonies, white people, put laws in place to restrict the movement and freedom of both enslaved people and free black people alike. See, it's not about free versus slave in the colonies. They were oppressive racists. Even people restricting the freedoms of people based on their skin color, not on their status, their legal status. It's just horrific. It's freaking horrific. So that is episode 4 if you want to check that one out. Now we're going to go against the Germantown Petition against slavery. Again, things I don't know about. In 1688 in Pennsylvania, a group of 4 men created the Germantown Petition, which made the case that slavery was immoral. Yes, don't tell me, oh, it was a different time. They didn't know any better. They knew better. They knew better. And when you don't teach history, people will say crap like, oh, well, they had a different moral framework at the time. You can't really judge them by today's standards. Yes, they might have been racist, by their own standards in today's, but, they had a different moral framework. They didn't think that what they were doing was wrong. Yes, they knew what they were doing was wrong. Absolutely. So it made the case that slavery was immoral and that it was inconsistent with Christian beliefs in general. Yes. Yes. Obviously. I know Paul tried to reconcile it because for all their talk about freedom and whatever else and love, Paul was just as attached to hierarchies, unjustified hierarchies, as anyone else in that time period. But, and in Quaker, to getting on with the text, with Christian beliefs in general and Quaker beliefs specifically. While the petition wasn't ultimately adopted by the Quaker hierarchy, because, hierarchies like to preserve unjustified status. So once you start unpacking the unjustified status of whites over blacks, and you admit people are equal, well then how do you feel like an alpha dog? Who do you know how to bully? I mean, that's the mentality of patriarchy and white supremacy. While the petition wasn't ultimately adopted by the Quaker hierarchy, examining the document and its author's goals gives us a better insight into slavery in the colonies and some of the earliest organized attempts at abolition. It is really important when people come to you with that blah blah blah. Oh, they didn't know any better. The Germantown Petition in 1688 is proof of it. So, yeah, although I did learn being anti-slavery doesn't mean that somebody is actually for equality. I don't want slavery done in my country, but I also don't really like, I don't think black people are equal. A lot of abolitionists. All right, next one up. This is the Stono Rebellion. Never really heard about a lot of rebellions in class. Gotta admit. Didn't really hear about slave revolts or rebellions. Enslaved people resisted their condition in a range of different ways. Oftentimes those ways were small and personal. There were also times when that resistance took on larger, more dramatic forms, like with slave uprising and rebellions. Again, didn't really learn about slave rebellions being put down and and executions, because it's a little bit inconsistent with land of the free, home of the brave, isn't it? Today we'll learn about the Stono Rebellion, which was an uprising led by enslaved people in South Carolina in 1784. We'll also talk about ways that enslaved people resisted in general and methods like enforced illiteracy used by those who sought to keep bondage. Just say white people! Used by white people! In particular white men, but white people generally, who sought to keep people in bondage. Is again this sort of like tiptoeing around the real obvious naming of who held power, which was generally white men, but obviously they were supported by white women. I don't actually care if my great-great-grandfather knew better. I'm not interested in judging him, only correcting the lingering effects of injustice. But I do think there are people who feel like, I don't want them to be seen as bad people, so I'm going to say they didn't know any better. That emphasis on, it was those who are exploiting and torturing who need our sympathy and our understanding, not the oppressed and their victim. It's a very, apologia way of looking at it that a lot of people. Right, here we go, Phyllis Wheatley. There you go. Who was calling out Phyllis Wheatley? Matthew, yes, absolutely. The Second Amendment was about the states in particular, like white men wanting to be able to instantly organize militias in order to put down and terrorize black people in their states without having to wait for the federal government to. Absolutely. Hey, Chris. Here we go. Phyllis Wheatley. I hope you're happy. This is the one you were talking about. Despite all the hardships of being a black person in colonial America, some black people were able to defy the harsh conditions and create art. Today we're learning about a teenager who attained literacy. How did she do that when it was against the law in most places? That's pretty dangerous. And wrote poems that reached a large slice of the population and helped change the way that white colonists thought about black people. It's so frustrating how it is the oppressed who have to appeal and win the favor of the people who are oppressing them just to have their basic humanity recognized. It's so frustrating. Ugh. All right. I admit with some embarrassment that I've heard of things. See, this is it, Lindsay. Jeden Tag ist ein Schultag. Every day is a school day. And this channel, one of the things I wanted to do was kind of promote continued education, adult learning, inspire people, connect them with ideas as we get out of school, because we were completely indoctrinated in terms of the narrative, the mythos, at least in my generation. And I actually think Wisconsin was probably a bit more fair because, it's a northern state, so we weren't invested in preserving Southern honor. And if anything, we're kind of like those Southerners deserved it. But there was no honesty about the racism in the North. There was no reflection on the fact that Milwaukee, Wisconsin is the most segregated school district in America. So while we're like, oh yeah, you rebel scum, what are we doing in our own backyards? How can we judge the South? I mean, we can't judge the South, but how can we do it credibly when we're producing exact same, or if not worse, racial segregation that they have in the South? And that honesty and those uncomfortable questions, people still want to deal with. Hey, hiya, Lonely Wolf. I said hi to you at the beginning. I don't know if you saw when we first started. I don't know who you're saying hi you to. Maybe you're saying it to Pill Mama. But anyway, yeah, so there we go. Now, if you want to learn, I'm going to learn more about Phyllis Wheatley because I'm going to be watching this series. Next up, the American Revolution. All right, this is how slavery, was a big part of the American Revolution, even though we tend to, not want to talk about it. When we talk about the American Revolution and Revolutionary War, the discussion often involves lofty ideas like liberty, freedom, and justice. Yeah, because we focus on white men talking about what rights and powers they wanted to share amongst themselves and nobody else. And we're meant to identify with the oppressors. We're meant to identify with the men who held slaves and who didn't acknowledge the sort of legal independence of women, white women, let alone any, and who thought the native people were savages. We're meant to identify and think as the good guys, these massive flaming racists who had ideas of equality and liberty, but only for themselves based on their genitalia and their skin color. But we're not supposed to notice that part. We're supposed to notice their aspirations without their filters and exclusionary, if-then conditions. This is why it's mythos. We're not taught history, we're taught myth. So, the Declaration of Independence even opens with the idea that, quote, all men are created equal, unquote. But it turns out the war wasn't being fought on behalf of all men. The war was mainly about freedom for white colonists, liberty and justice, and the pursuit of happiness didn't apply to black people living in the British colonies. During the war, black people took up arms on both sides of the colony, and today we're going to learn how and why they participated. Can you blame a single enslaved black person for wanting to join up with the monarchists against your direct oppressors? I can't. I can't even fault. In fact, I sympathize with every single enslaved person who saw an opportunity for freedom and took it because the white men were doing the same thing for themselves while actively denying even free black men from participating as soldiers. So I have total sympathy with people who would have who would have put their own self-interest and their freedoms first. They weren't traitors, they were freedom fighters. You could say the monarchy and all that was oppressive, but when it comes to enticing black Americans who had nothing to look forward to but a lifetime of slavery for themselves and their children, absolutely go shoot some white colonists. How can I say that they're wrong if the colonists are right? How is Thomas Jefferson right to fight for his freedom, but a slave isn't right to fight for theirs? Okay, moving on. Yeah, we're gonna, I think there's only a couple more. What is there a total? I don't know what the total was. 14. All right, so we got 5 more to get through. I'm just going to go over the sampler. You can pick out ones that you're interested in, or you can go ahead and watch the whole series, whatever you'd like to do. I'm just doing an FYI because I needed content to fill and we needed a topic. All right, now this is about the Constitution, the 3/5 Agreement, and the Slave Trade Clause. Slave Trade Clause. What's that? I don't know about that. All right, the drafting and adoption of the United States Constitution recalled many of the high ideals of liberty and freedom that were espoused during the Revolutionary War. But the compromises that were made to get all of the new states on board to ratify the Constitution undermined those ideals in a lot of ways. Today we'll learn about the 3/5 Clause and the Fugitive Slave Clause. Oh, that was what they're talking about, the Fugitive Slave Clause, not Act. I felt like, but no, I'm okay. Which entrenched the institution of slavery in the fundamental law of the states. Yeah, because white men's freedom was built on the economic prosperity that was created by enslavement. So free white men needed were justified the enslavement of others. It's just getting harder. It's getting harder and harder to respect the version of the founders that I was presented with, the more that I learn about their hypocrisy. Had I learned this earlier, I don't think it would have, been such a big deal to process. When I learned about Heidegger, for instance, I'm thinking of the right one, right? Yeah, Heidegger. He was the Nazi sympathizer / Nazi narc / probably a Nazi himself. One of the things I learned about him was that he was a Nazi. And so I never, that was always a calculation. Oh, yeah, massive Nazi. He might have had some, interesting points that have made contributions to philosophy, but Nazi, And when you learn about the founders and it is completely sanitized, and completely whitewashed, then it actually is, I think, more damaging to kind of, it's just hard to redeem when you've been lied to about what these men believed and then they can't live up to it. Anyway, right, let's continue on. The next one of the ways is called the Fugitive Slave Act, which I guess they're going to do a whole episode on that, which fair enough. One of the ways the U.S. Constitution baked the institution of slavery into the very core of the new United States was through the Fugitive. Laws required that people who escaped slavery be returned to their enslavers. So much for land of the free, home of the brave, huh? In parts of the United States that didn't want slavery, the clause sometimes went forced. Today we'll learn about how Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Law of 1793 to enforce that clause, how enslavers throughout the country used that rule, and the long-term effects of the law. When we watched on Friday, we dipped into the 13th, which was about slavery and how one of the ways you can still legally be enslaved in the United States is through the prison system. When people say slavery, it was a long time ago. No, no, it wasn't. It's just the echoes. The thing is, people walk around in the echoes of slavery and racism and hate and white supremacy. What is it? Racism is so American, went the poster, that when you protest racism, people think you're protesting. It's just so mixed in. It's like pouring milk into your tea. If the tea is a racism and the milk is the white aspirations for freedom, right? You can't, white is like the white-dominated American history. They're so intermingled. You can't go back to that mixed cup of tea and separate out the milk from the tea anymore. It's just one unit. They're so intertwined. And that is the version of American history that they don't want us to, they haven't taught us. All right, so 2 more to go. They've also covered women's experience under slavery. And I think this is also important because so many times things get sort of normal or just homogenized, and oftentimes the male experience is taken as the normal. Usually because, men are more focused on men, and so they tend to write more about men and have certain perspectives they value more. And so really paying attention to women's history in any group, whether that's Native people, Hispanic people in America, white women, black women, you really do have to make a conscious effort because of the andronormative position. I don't know, what is the word for that? We've got heteronormative, cisnormative, but this idea that the natural default of any position is a male position. You have to kind of consciously make an effort to look for women or pull things together to make the connections, because in the past people didn't. So slavery was inherently cruel and unjust, and it was cruel and unjust to different people in different ways. Today, Clint Smith teaches you about the experience of enslaved women, how their experience of slavery was different from men. This is also, another thing that is not taught in schools is sexual predation, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation by white of black. Really does not get discussed. A lot of there's honesty about the terrible nature of the ships and and of the slave trade, the conditions of maybe the hot boxes or treeing people who were trying to run for freedom. They would tree them with dogs and all that kind of stuff. But the admission of white men being sexual predators for centuries. We have offspring to prove it. That class of sexual predation, not honestly dealt with at all. So I'm glad that they are looking at women's experience, really looking at the ways. It's an intersectional, right? we're looking at race, slavery, and also sex, gender here, because we'll the aggregates. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch. Another rebellion I didn't know about, a Louisiana rebellion of 1811. Uprisings of enslaved people in the United States were not uncommon, hence the desire for white people to want to arm themselves and to keep black people unarmed. And they had a big influence on how the institution of slavery evolved. One of the uprisings that gets less attention is the German Coast Uprising that took place in Louisiana in 1811. A group of enslaved people rebelled, and the after effects would be felt in Louisiana and throughout the nation for decades. I know nothing about them. Zip, zilch, nada, niente. And hopefully now, in a couple days, I will. The last one that they've produced so far, this just came out on the 14th, so that would have been yesterday. Brand new one. The rise of cotton. Cotton is everywhere in our modern world and became a hugely important crop in the 19th century in the United States. Cotton was a huge economic boon to the U.S. Much of that wealth was built on the backs of enslaved. And cotton didn't only benefit the states where slavery was legal. While cotton was mainly grown in the southern states, much of that cotton was processed in northern textile mills. Today we'll learn about the growth of cotton industry, who benefited from it, and who was. And this is, more and more too. I feel like the version of history that I got was kind of like North good, South bad in terms of the Civil War and the issue of slavery. Really simplistic. When the fact is that the North was absolutely complicit. And is in many ways, it's like just as racist, if not legally oppressive. The North was not a bastion of, progressive human rights and humanism. So there is so much here to. Oh, is that one more? I guess. Why didn't I get to the? Oh no, that was the last one. Yeah, done on the 14th. So please go check that out. A real fascinating, so much good stuff here. Probably depressing, probably really heavy going, but we should be witnesses to history. We should be honest about it, because if we cover up what people suffered through in terms of oppression, exploitation, then we haven't learned the moral tale of being better than that. Like, we need a country that acknowledges those sufferings and that wrong in order to learn from it and rectify it and care. Yeah, definitely as I'm going on, reparations seems so much more obvious as a needed remedy to fix these historical. It was centuries of theft, and they're owed. A lot of people are owed what was stolen from their ancestors that they never had a chance to make. The North had no financial incentive to look out for the well-being of not white people. Absolutely. No reason to think they'd be better than binary good guy, bad guy thinking. But again, being from a northern state and learning the sort of slightly northern spin on it, it's very much presented like, oh, the South was so. Racism in our own backyard's not covered. When we learned about the history of Wisconsin, we didn't learn that. All right, so, that's, I hope you guys go check that out now. And next week, also go check out my video here on this channel after we're done with this. You can go give me some comments on that. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, please do. Actually, it's probably better to get me on Twitter. I don't really. YouTube comments are terrible. I mean, generally, just not my channel, but generally. So I don't so much pay attention. But if you have any particular things you want to get a hold of me to say, it was best to get me there. So I think, I went actually 10 minutes longer than I aimed. And I'm going to finish going to do the prep for my game session later on tonight. If you want to hear my voice again in a few hours' time, you can come over to my channel, D&D with Kristi. Last night we broadcast part 3 of a summer camp slasher horror flick adventure that I was just running with a small group of friends. If you want to listen to that, Kristiosity, Costa, and Sibby joined me for a little three-person adventure in a haunted, well, in a. But otherwise, if that is not your thing, I will be back with more intelligent, hopefully, content next time, a little bit more original. And we'll try to get back to some nerdy stuff on Weber and the introduction. What is it? The philosophy of... Let me get the book up. Yeah, we'll hopefully get back to the philosophy of science. Now I can switch which window I'm using. Oops, so you can see. There we go. And Weber next time. I couldn't handle. Alright, you guys. And if I don't see you before on the happy hour, or until the next time I see you, be happy, be safe, be well, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. I have been Kristi. You have been awesome. We'll see each other again really soon. Okay. Catch y'all later. Bye.